feel bad for you.
I don't think about you at all.
I just saw Dune Part 2 in 70mm no less, and it was very good. Seriously, it was as immersive an experience as I remember a movie being in quite some time. It looks incredible, the sound design really stands out, and the movie itself has tons of great action. If you enjoyed Dune Part 1, I think this one delivers on a lot of what was set up there, but I'd even go as far as to say you could probably get through Part 2 without having seen the first one. My number one complaint is the theater I went to didn't have the goddamn novelty popcorn bucket. I am fuming. My weekend plans are ruined now. It's definitely nice to see a blockbuster that takes itself more seriously than what the superhero or science fiction genres have become in recent years.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
The old man gave it to you.
It's just very hard to understand you with
All the acting was great, and I have to root for Timothée Chalamet because his cabbage looks exactly like my dog's. I mean, look at these mops. Practically brothers. I know they're all great actors, but when I think of Zendaya or Florence Pugh, even Oscar Isaac and Jason Momoa, it's hard to get all of their quippy, sarcastic roles out of my head. And it's even harder for me to focus when I see Christopher Walken show up.
We did Saturday Night Live, and Christopher Walken was the host.
Amazing.
And he comes up and he's like, he asked us if the accent was on Foo or Fighters. And we know who he is. Like, of course, we know how he speaks. And we said, the accent is on Fighters, actually. So he goes up there.
How did he ask you? How did he ask you?
I'm not going to say that part. Because he goes up, he's like, ladies and gentlemen, Foo Fighters.
But Denis Villeneuve directed the shit out of everybody here, and I really thought Rebecca Ferguson and LMU's finest Austin Butler stood out as stellar. Except wait, maybe those of you who have seen it can tell me, was Austin Butler doing Stellan Skarsgård accent? He definitely put some of that Skarsy energy on his lines, right?
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Also, quick aside, one time I saw Austin Butler at this local organic grass-fed steak restaurant in Santa Monica, and we were the only two tables in there, so the owner was taking pictures with him and giving him tours of the back. I mean, he could have easily invited me on this little tour, but he didn't. But then a few months later, it came out that the beef they were serving there wasn't organic at all, and they closed forever. Yeah, I can't help but think about that whenever I see him in a movie. Visually, Dune 2 kicks so much ass. All of the props, costumes, and set design looked so good and so real. Nothing has that plastic chrome looking finish you see with a lot of the CGI in modern films. I really love the different color palettes for each of the planets, and they do a good job of what I'll call creative PG-13 gore. Story-wise, it's definitely the second half of a full story, the back end of a classic adventure, and the action and characters will certainly keep you engaged. There isn't much more I would want to say without getting into spoilers. If you think you might be interested in this movie, then I do think you'll like it. If you hate sand or Timothée Chalamet's face, you might want to sit this one out. Okay, so here's your spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1, here we go. I have never read the books, but Dune Part 2 did a great job delivering on the self-discovery theme set up in the first movie for Paul Atreides. The burden of his heritage and his hesitancy to embrace his destiny were introduced in Part 1, but this film, I thought, carefully checked back on this motif with fun twists and turns thrown in. Overall, you saw Paul grow in a satisfying manner and accept an identity of the Messiah of the Freemen and the next in line of the House of Atreides. That last part is really important because of the callback to this scene in the first movie.
A great man doesn't seek to lead. He's called to it. And he answers. And if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be. My son.
Paul had rejected this call to lead and doubted himself as the future of House Atreides over and over and over again. So seeing him embrace it, well, it feels real good. Kind of like that popcorn bucket would have. Whether or not you view Dune as a religious allegory, that additional story beat about anti-theism or the skeptics who believe religion is used to manipulate persons for political gains, that keeps the Chosen One storyline from getting stale. I also appreciate that they don't overdo it on the lore in this movie. There's a ton more of that in Part 1, but lore is always best if I can go read about it on my own time. I don't need everything about the Duneverse in one place to enjoy these movies. I just need the important stuff. One more thing that's great about Dune is that the superpowers are kind of shitty. When you overlevel your characters in a fantasy movie, I can't help but think of ways they could have used those powers to solve the problems. I love that the main ones we see here are maybe not premonitions, the voice that works sometimes, and then the worm guy can sort of float around a little. I don't know if the plot was adapted faithfully from the book, so it's hard to criticize any particular pieces of the story. I did think it was kind of weird that Paul proves he's the chosen one by telling everyone a story about some random guy's grandmother. That's what did it, huh? That really quelled the doubters. You have the power to see into the past and future, and you showcase this by telling everyone this guy's grandma's dead? Astonishing. Also, am I wrong on this, but the movies never mention the text of the prophecy verbatim, so it's supposed to be this big reveal that the tears of Desert Spring will revive him, and that's actually referring to Zendaya? But it's not like we could have figured that out. You never told us that. And don't give me, it was in the books. I didn't read the books, okay? I was too busy not being born yet. Let's get back on track. I liked the ending of the film. The fight scenes are gangster, and I left the theater wanting more. All in all, I think this movie really succeeds on the visuals, the sound, and the acting. And that is not at all a slight against it. It's fun to escape into a far-out world that you can project yourself into. And if the story felt too familiar, that's probably a product of the fact that we've seen other writers borrow from Dune and works just like it 100 times since its release in the 60s. Dune 2 was definitely worth my time, and I would love to see more from the Duneverse. So again, I recommend it, and I recommend seeing it if you can in theaters, but seriously, I need that popcorn bucket, you guys. I am not messing around.